Something that's oddly difficult in Commander is actually finishing the game. 120 life is just a bit too much, especially when 3 other players are trying to stop us from dealing damage. Because of that, Commander decks need dedicated and powerful finishers. The most classic example here is, of course, Craterhoof Behemoth, a massive overrun that can add hundreds of power to our board and win the game on the spot. It's undeniably a strong card, but allow me to make what's maybe a bit of a controversial statement. Craterhoof Behemoth is overrated. Not because it's not good, but because it's not necessary. The kinds of boards that Craterhoof turns into a win are also the kinds of boards that can be enabled by other, cheaper overruns. And when I say cheaper, I do mean monetarily cheaper. Even with its recent reprint, Craterhoof Behemoth is still an expensive card, and it's already rising in pricing it. I firmly believe that you don't need expensive cards or decks to perform well in Commander. Budget gaming is totally possible, and all of my personal decks start out as budget versions that I then iterate on over time. It's actually pretty trivial to build around 80 to 90% of a deck on a really low budget, because most of the standard supporting pieces have been frequently reprinted and are super affordable, or they were never expensive to begin with. Cards like Arcane Signet, Generous Gift, Dream Fracture, Feed the Swarm, Blasphemous Act, and Cultivate. Look at me, I remembered all the colors. Now I have a bit of a confession to make. This is where my script went a little bit off the rails, because this is where I was going to tell you that while the supporting and removal options are cheaper, the most common finishers that we can find on sites like EDHREC tend to be more expensive. But then as I started scrolling through the list of the most popular cards, I had to go really far to even find any finishers. Do Ruinous Ultimatum or Cyclonic Rift count? Those are just board vibes. Yeah, they can win a game, but not by themselves. Maybe Jeskas will? Is the earliest unambiguous kill people card Eerie Ultimatum? It seems I've stumbled onto an entirely different issue that still makes this video necessary. So let's get to the meat of it. I've prepared a package of 9 cards that cost a combined €16, just a tad bit more than a single Craterhoof, while each being individually powerful enough to push a game to its conclusion. That's not to say that they are all cards that will instantly win the match, but rather that they'll put us into positions to do so rapidly. And yeah, sometimes even immediately. I'm going to assume mono-green for my explanations, but of course you can play these in any green-inclusive decks you like, and they will still perform excellently. Let's start with the simplest card on the list, a creature I've been dying to talk about and never found an opportunity to. Mana Gocha Hydra is a 3-mana 1/1 with Trample. It also gains a +1/+1 counter whenever a player casts a spell. This is the individually most powerful creature in Commander, and when I say most powerful, I mean that very literally. It's the biggest stat stick in the game. Now, to be fair, there's no shortage of big creatures in green, many of which have additional utility. And there are plenty of other variations of Mana Gocha Hydra, like Taurian Mauler or Forgotten Ancient. But none of those come close to its sheer stopping power. I have won entire games by playing a Mana Gocha Hydra on turn 3 and then protecting it for the rest of the match. I usually expect Mana Gocha Hydra to get at least 10 counters per turn rotation, and often it gets more. This is one of the few creatures that will just straight up tank a Blasphemous Act. And, most importantly, it already has Trample, meaning it can't really be blocked. I've had players throw entire armies in front of my Mana Gocha Hydra just to survive the hit. This is a game-ending threat that needs no synergy and no help. It scales with game length, as more spells cast just means a faster growth, and it can function fully independently from the rest of our deck. But of course, that doesn't mean we can't throw down an asceticism and play defense with everything else while we one-shot our opponents. I understand, I'm just recommending a big, dumb green snake. But how much damage does a 3-mana spell have to do? How much pressure does it need to apply to be worth it? And sure, it might eat us swords. But hey, that's a sword's gun that's not coming at our commander. And also, we just gained 30 life. But my favorite thing to do with Mana Gorger Hydra is combining it with one of the nastiest ramp spells in Commander. Traverse the Outlands. Traverse the Outlands is a 5-mana sorcery that lets us ramp X basics, where X is the greatest power among creatures we control. Most Commander games between reasonably skilled players, which is to say basically no Commander games. Most Commander games between reasonably skilled players will come down to a battle of resources. Card draw is usually abundant, so more often than not, mana is the limiting factor that decides matches, and Traverse the Outlands gives us a huge mana lead. We are in green. We should have a 4 or 5 attack creature on the board at basically all times. And even with only that, Traverse will ramp out 4 lands for 5 mana, which is an absolutely insane rate. And if we go above that, it's a game-winning advantage. On the following turn, while our opponents struggle to play 2 spells, we can start casting 3 or even 4, storming ahead in a way that's incredibly difficult to stop because there's not just one thing that needs to be dealt with. Once the mana base is established, there just isn't much anyone can do to slow it down. However, the process of casting a big ramp spell can leave us exposed, as we aren't progressing our board that turn. That is, unless we have played Spelunking. Spelunking is a 3-mana enchantment that, when it enters, lets us draw a card and put a land from our hand into play. It also has some other text regarding case, but whatever. Spelunking's real power starts once it's in play, as it makes all of our lands enter untapped. Can you imagine playing bounce lands and having them enter untapped? Absolutely broken. I don't think I need to explain anymore. Okay, maybe I should. The real power of Spelunking doesn't stem from enabling tap lands. It comes from casting ramp spells and being able to immediately use our newly acquired mana. Effectively reducing the casting cost of any single land ramp spell by 1 is fantastic. But of course, the more we ramp, the better Spelunking becomes. I just talked about how Traverse the Outlands lets us start double and triple casting the turn after we played it, but with Spelunking, these kinds of big ramp spells immediately go mana positive. Spelunking has previously allowed me to cast Traverse the Outlands into Boundless Realms, which of course then gave me even more mana for that turn. Spelunking is the kind of card that can enable huge, flashy plays that win the game on the spot, or it just gives us a little bit of extra mana every single turn, building a consistent advantage across a match. Now, other untappers like Tiller Engine or Amulet of Vigor also exist, but what makes Spelunking better than those other options is how easy it is to cast, because it also acts as ramp itself. We don't have to be careful with it, we can just slam it whenever we get the chance. Rounding out our game-winning ramp, we got Mana Reflection. Mana Reflection is a 6-mana enchantment that simply says whenever we tap a permanent for mana, we add twice as much instead. While this card may seem expensive and difficult to cast, it's actually a free spell. So long as we have 12 mana sources in play, which I understand sounds like a lot, but come on, we're in green. So long as we have 12 mana sources in play, Mana Reflection immediately pays for itself. Tap 6, play Mana Reflection, tap the other 6 for 12. Next turn we are untapping with 24, and that should really be enough to close out the match with a variety of different game plans. Moving on from ramp, but staying in the realm of expensive spells, I would like to make a case for Azuri's Predation. This is an 8-mana sorcery that, for each creature our opponents control, summons a 4/4 green Phyrexian beast to fight it. It's one of the few board vibes that green has access to. Well, it's kind of a board vibe. Usually, Azuri's Predation clears about 90% of the board, leaving the strongest creatures intact. While that can be a problem, most of the time it isn't, because it also leaves us with a massive board of 4/4 beasts. By itself, this is fine and reasonably strong, But what makes this card amazing is its interaction with green's most effective method of card draw, being creature enters the battlefield checks, like Garrick's Uprising, Elemental Bond, and Tribute to the World Tree. With just one of these on the board, Azuri's Predation also reads, draw cards equal to the number of creatures your opponents control. And that, in combination with its other advantages, is a game-winning line of text. But even setting these synergies aside, I've won many games by just casting an Azuri's Predation and then smacking people with the tokens. It can build boards out of nowhere, and green is absolutely amazing at closing out matches from that position, and that's because of Overruns. Thank you very much for watching this video so far. If you've enjoyed it, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and check out our Patreon. There's a link down in the description. You can support us directly, and that will also give you access to a whole bunch of additional content, mostly just unscripted videos of me talking about decks or new cards as they're getting revealed, but there's a bunch of it and it's fun, so go check that out. We talked about Craterhoof Behemoth earlier, but I play that card in none of my decks, because there are two budget alternatives that I believe are usually stronger. The first is Overwhelming Stampede, a 5-mana sorcery that gives all of our creatures trample and +X/+X, where X is the greatest power among creatures we control. Overwhelming Stampede kills people. It can turn boards of 2 or 3 creatures into a lethal threat, and anything more than that into game-ending damage. What makes it special compared to other Overruns is that it works well for both wide and tall boards. But it does have the disadvantage of being a sorcery rather than a creature. That's where End-Race Forerunners come in, an 8-mana 7/7 with Vigilance, Trample and Haste that gives our other creatures +2/+2, Vigilance and Trample when it enters. End-Race Forerunners are my default finisher that I include in nearly all green decks because of how flexible they are. Of course, they can come down on a white board to kill all of our opponents. But because they also give Vigilance and are a formidable, hasty body, they allow for aggressive play while keeping up a defensive line. That last aspect is very important because it's common in the mid to late stages of a Commander game to enter a deadlock, where being aggressive just leaves us exposed to a counterattack from another player. End-Race Forerunners play incredibly well into those positions and allow us to force our opponents into action. They're also one of the few Overruns that can be played into an empty board and still be reasonably dangerous. Or, well, we could just destroy all of our opponent's mana instead. I've spoken about this a couple of times in the past, but I don't like mana rocks. I think they are really vulnerable, and as I mentioned earlier, mana is what actually wins games. But mana rocks are still incredibly popular, probably because wizards include them in every precon, even the green land-based ones. What's up with that? That's so weird. Anyway, this abundance of artifact-based mana is why Bane of Progress is one of the strongest creatures available. Bane of Progress is a 6-mana 2/2 that destroys all artifacts and enchantments when it enters, and then gets a +1/+1 counter for each permanent destroyed this way. Because of the aforementioned abundance of mana rocks, Bane of Progress more often than not just wins the game by itself. I'm not using symbolic exaggerated language here. I have won many games by simply casting Bane of Progress and then smacking people with it. It usually enters as at least a 10/10, more commonly a 15/15 or even more, and it forces our opponents into a state of rebuilding that they just can't catch up from. And yeah, often we're going to have to sacrifice some of our permanents as well, but we have control over the situation and get to choose when that becomes acceptable. Bane of Progress is the most expensive card I'm discussing today, at over €4, but I just couldn't find a sincere way of making this list that didn't include it. The same applies to our last card, which is only slightly cheaper at $350. Springout Nuku is a 2-mana enchantment creature that can be bestowed upon a creature for 2 mana. While bestowed, it gives +1/+1, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we can pay 2 mana to create a copy of the enchanted creature. If we don't, we create a 1/1 insect instead. Springheart Nuku is one of the most broken magic cards ever printed. Clone effects are usually priced at 4 mana, and then surely aren't repeatable. Now, to be fair, the first clone of Springheart Nantuko does cost a total of 4 mana, but further ones are only 2 each, and that can be repeated as often as we can play a land. Think about everything we talked about today, about the advantages and finishes that green excels at, and how they play into Springheart Nantuko. Big ramp, untapping, and mana amplification give us a million triggers and the resources to pay for them. And then enchanting Endray's Forerunners kills people on the spot, while copying Mana Gocha Hydras creates a hilarious army that needs to be dealt with. Quickly, I'm running out of dice, please stop casting spells. We can also enchant Thorn Mammoth, for example, to create a bigger, bramblier Azuri's Predation. And while duplicating a Bane of Progress would also destroy our Nantuko, that doesn't matter as our Mana Rock dependent friends stand no chance at a second round of recovery. Enchant it onto Steve or Fecund Greenshell to ramp, on Tireless Provisioner for infinite mana, on Avenger of Zendikar to completely lose your mind tracking plants and counters for plants. Once you start playing with this card, you will quickly see how it synergizes with everything green does and escalates our resources and board into states that either win on the spot or just can't be overcome anymore. Best of all, we can enchant our opponent's stuff and steal their creatures, which isn't quite as good, but very funny. Commander really isn't as expensive as it often seems. I see so many decklists that cost a casual $500, and when I started out, I found that to be really intimidating. But as I became better at the game and learned about more cards, I began defaulting to budget decks, not only because I think it's more fun, but also because it's totally fine. Yeah, all the finishers you find online are horribly expensive, but just play Spelunking and Endray's Forerunners. It's all we need. It'll do the trick just fine. Always keep in mind that we don't actually need to deal hundreds of damage. We just need to kill our opponents. I made this video because way too many people don't play finishes. This happens so much. I win so many games because I'm just the only one that seemingly plays Overruns. You just gotta kill people at some point, right? You gotta end the game eventually. So I thought I could make you a list for a bunch of options on how you can win at Commander. I'm not saying that winning is important, but you gotta end the game. You gotta end the game. Don't just turtle up. Don't play propaganda. Play Endray's Forerunners. I'm actually a bit of a propaganda hater because all the propaganda players, they put it down and they never attack. I have a black deck that is like full aggro, and I play no mercy in that, and that's just because I have no blockers, and I'm just gonna keep running at you, so... You know, if you get me, at least I get a little bit of retaliation. As otherwise, I'm just gonna get hit and die. But anyways, that's besides the point a little bit. What's also besides the point, actually maybe not, is my Patreon. Go check out Patreon. Patreon link in the description. Would be very good. Thank you very much. Would really appreciate it. Again, there is content on there. I'm literally just about to go and record a little bit more right now. So yeah. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up. I also saw some people asking if I'm going to the Command Fest in Bonn. And yeah, just about to buy my tickets. Like I just organized it. I haven't bought the tickets. I'm gonna buy the tickets right now. So we're going. I'll see ya there, maybe. I'll see you next video, probably. That's more like, I'm gonna go. I'm rambling. Goodbye.